Welcome to The Way the World Works, where the trusted team behind the Tuttle Twins books tackles current events, hot topics, and fun ideas to help your family find clarity in a world full of confusion.
Hi, Connor.
Hey, Brittany.
So we record these a little bit in advance, as we've said before, but by the time our listeners listen to this episode, the Olympics will just have started. And I'm going to be a party pooper, and I'm going to rain on everyone's parade today.
Yay!
I like being a contrarian because the Olympics are literally my least favorite 2 weeks of whatever, every 4 years, every 2 years, whatever it is now. So everyone loves the Olympics. Everyone is filled with national pride, whatever it is. But I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big sports fan, but part of the reason I don't like the Olympics, or the main reason, is that it is an economic disaster. The the repercussions of it are so bad, but a lot of people like to say it's the opposite. Everyone likes to call this, an economic booster. This is the same reason a lot of cities will say we should build a new soccer stadium and have the taxpayers pay for it because we're going to make all this money. And it never happened. So to kind of get this conversation started, Connor, you and I both lived in Utah in 2002. Well, wait, did you live in Utah then?
I did actually.
Okay,
Yeah, I was in Utah at the time.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I knew you went to high school but you already graduated. But anyway, okay, so
Yep,
that
yep.
was 2002. Salt Lake hosted the Olympics. And I don't know if you remember, Connor, but I remember turning on the news and all these politicians were promising everybody that, this was going to be the best idea, that we were going to make all this money. Do you remember some of what they were promising?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it was, all these facilities have to be built, and some of the existing facilities had to be upgraded. And so it was this idea of, it's going to have all these jobs. We're going to have all this construction work. It'll be great. We'll need to employ people for the Olympics themselves. This is like a job creation thing, right? Like, so there's definitely a lot of that, and that this isn't what actually happens though. Like, so there was a study of the Salt Lake Olympics, and they found that at most 1/4 of the number of jobs that officials had claimed would be created were actually created. One fourth. And
Not
there's
very
actually
much.
yeah, there's actually a quote from this article that says the study found no identifiable increase in employment either before or after the Olympics. And while they find a statistically significant bump, meaning like a realistic bump in employment during the actual games themselves, the increase was from 4,000 to 7,000. So
Which isn't that much.
not very much at all. And this isn't a one-off case. Like, promises of job growth is I feel like not the only negative aspect of the Olympics. There's this idea of general economic growth. We're going to help all these people create all these jobs. Again, studies find little to no positive impact from hosting the Olympic Games. It just does not happen. And yet over and over again, it's like, let's spend all this money. Let's do all this grand thing. It's going to be this wonderful economic development utopia. And it would be nice if we would look to history and say, guys, this doesn't really happen. So why do we keep like letting people claim that it happens when we know it doesn't happen? And yet over and over again, they still talk about this being a great thing for the economy.
And we don't even have to look that far into history. And it's not even that there's no economic bump, it's that there's decline. So I think Brazil was in 2016. And this was supposed to be a game changer for the country. I mean, they were so excited for this. They had been going through their own, economic downturn, and it was going to be the thing, right? The Olympics were going to help them rebuild. So they build all these facilities, and of course, that's really expensive. And who's paying for these? We are, taxpayers are. And so after the games end, it turned out that the stadiums and everything that they ended up paying for costs more than the money they brought in. So like they're thinking like, oh my goodness, like this is gonna be huge for us. We're gonna create jobs. And as it turned out, they actually lost jobs and they lost money.
I'm shaking my head. You can't see it. Like, to me, that the tragedy here is that these promises just don't come true. And, you know, no one can prove that like tourism increases, or that, money that was poured into some new facility resulted in an increase in economic increase during the games. It's not just that the economic boost wore off after time. It's that it never really happened to begin with. There was this one article over at Fee, and we'll link to it on our show notes page, where it says that Great Britain received about 5% fewer foreign visitors during the month that it hosted the 2012 Summer Olympics than during the same month the year before. I mean, Greece, they lost 70,000 jobs, mostly in the construction industry, in the 3 months immediately after their 2004 games. So if you remember, like Bastiat, right? That which is seen and that which is
Yeah.
unseen, it's so easy to focus on, oh, look, right before the Olympics, we're creating all these jobs. And yet, it's very temporary, or those people would be working elsewhere. You're not really creating jobs. You're just, diverting people to work on this pork project, this taxpayer funded project, but then, they return back to their unemployment or their job elsewhere. And I feel like, it's very important to know something about the free market. When there's real demand, it delivers. And for those who really want the Olympics, there's been one attempt to at least partially privatize the Olympics, and I think we should learn a little bit from this example.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I actually wrote about this a handful of years ago, but it's
Hmm.
such a good story, Connor. So I'm excited to talk about it. In the 80s, which was our time, that's when Connor and Brittany came into the world on the same day, by the way.
Different
People,
different years
different
though.
year. I am younger, but people recognize that the Olympics were financially risky. I don't know why they've forgotten this all of a sudden, but when it came time for host cities, when they want to host the Olympics, they have to bid for it. So they make all these promises like, we'll do this if you let us host, or we'll do this. It's actually very expensive to bid to host the games. But get this, in 1984, no one wanted it. No one wanted it. Only two cities made a bid, and that was New York and LA. Nobody wanted it. And that's because in 1976, Montreal in Canada, they hosted the games and they found themselves in $1.5 billion in debt.
Whoa,
Yes, and they didn't even pay that off until 2006. So several
30
decades,
years.
yes,
Wow.
for them to pay it off. So Los Angeles ends up winning the bid in 1984, but the residents were actually like, no, we're not having this. We are not going to foot the bill. We're not going to do what Montreal did. So the people of Los Angeles put their foot down. They're like, we're not going to do it. So the city now had this great honor, air quotes, of hosting the Olympics, but they had no way to pay for it.
That's crazy. And Los Angeles of all places.
I know,
You
right?
know, it I mean, for me, like, this is where the market comes into play. I remember there was a local businessman who was this guy that was good with money, and he wanted the game, so he stepped up and became kinda like this Olympic entrepreneur, you might say. So he spearheads, he's in charge of this, Olympic organizing committee, and it's made up of other, like, entrepreneurs and business savvy individuals, and they had this goal. They said, "We wanna find private funding for the Olympic Games." And this was something that, like, hadn't been done before. And, understandably, for that reason, since it was different, critics weren't initially sold on the idea of leaving the fate of the Olympic Games to this committee of just, businessmen. But the 1984 Olympics would go on to be remembered as like one of the most successful Olympic Games in history. Not only did this committee of businessmen come under budget, meaning they didn't spend as much as they had planned. They also managed to generate a profit, which I think had only happened once before. And so they did private fundraising, they had corporate sponsorships. I mean, we see this with like NFL and soccer, and like, of course, Nike and Adidas and whatever. Like the logos are everywhere. These companies are Coca-Cola, right? They're paying tons of money, and that's how sports can be, paid for because it's very expensive. And these guys managed their money well. So this committee pulled off, I think, at the time, what was unthinkable. Instead of throwing away millions, if not billions of dollars on new infrastructure, they made use of existing arenas, college sports facilities, and they made history by selling the exclusive television rights to just one network, ABC. They paid, I think it was like $250 million to be America's only source for viewing the Olympic Games, which, you know, that's a very business savvy thing to do because ABC would want all those people watching the Olympics on their channel. That's going to let them sell more costly commercials, right? Because everyone will be on their
Like the
channel
Super Bowl.
rather than right. And
Yeah.
so they'd be able to make their money back. They'd be able to have good branding. And so then it helped fund the Olympics by saying, if you want exclusivity, you're going to have to pay more. And it just shows what, the private market can do when you let it work rather than these bloated bureaucracies.
Yeah, and I think is it ABC still? Again, I don't watch the Olympics. I wanna say it's
I don't know.
NBC. The last time I watched it was Carrie Strug in
Wow.
1996, so I don't know. But the other cool thing about this is, a lot of times they use the Olympics host cities to build new hotels, to build all this infrastructure. In fact, in Utah, there's so many, like, buildings they have to pretend have use now because they just don't have use. But instead of building new hotels and new places to host everybody, they used college dormitories. And
Hmm.
they used other housing facilities spread throughout the city instead of building so Olympic villages are what they're called. That's where all the actual talent, the athletes and everyone stay. And usually they build them these, grandiose, expensive places to stay. And LA was like, nah, like we've got college dormitories, we've got places to put you. And so this was completely unorthodox, unheard of for this time. And when all was said and done, the Los Angeles Summer Olympic Games cost a total of $546 million. Now, that's a lot of money. I know you and I are thinking like, all right, I don't have that much money.
Cha-ching.
Yeah, right. But let's compare this to in 2013, was it the Sochi, the one in Russia Winter Games? That was $50 billion.
Whoa.
Yes. So I mean, that's nothing. And I don't know if you guys
Well, and
remembered. Oh,
and
go
to be
on.
fair, Brittany, there was inflation between
Yes.
1984 and 2013. But even if like you tripled the money from 1984, that's 1.5 billion dollars. And so compared to the 50 billion, like that's crazy.
It's crazy, and I don't know if you guys remember seeing pictures from, the Russia games, like, everything was,
Uh-uh.
like, dilapidated, like, it became kinda comical because it was like, "Wait a second, where is this money going? Because this is all, like, just disgusting." So, the pictures were hilarious, if you can go back and look at them. But, like we mentioned, to call the LA Games solely private would be a little misleading. The city did receive, public funds. They did get some federal funds, but nothing has ever come close to being this private when we talk about the Olympics, and nobody thought it could be done. And the funny thing is, even though the 1984 games proved that there was a way to do this with limited government intervention, we've forgotten that. And it wasn't that long ago. I know because I was born around that time. But like, it's like we've forgotten that we can do it, right? And now it becomes this thing again where it's like, no, we need this. We need global unity or patriotism, whatever it is we're claiming, but we don't need to do it with taxpayer dollars. We've already seen it. We don't need to do it with taxpayer dollars.
I, and I just don't get why. I mean, like, what? Maybe it's because politics is tribal and sports is
Yep.
tribal, right? It's like you vote for the home team, and oh, our home team is also our government. Go USA! And so they're kind of one and the same. So let's then use government money for sports because it's the same tribe. Like I don't know if it's that type of simple thinking that leads politicians to spend money on the Olympics. I think a lot of it boils down to this idea of, oh hey, if we get the people to come here, then we're gonna have all this tourism dollars because they're gonna stay in hotels and eat at restaurants and buy things here. And so it's an investment, right? If we pay, $1 billion to have them come to our city, then if we make back this much money because people are buying things, then they pay taxes, sales taxes, things like that. Then we're gonna make our money back, and it's gonna be great publicity. But as the story you've shared, like it doesn't really always maybe ever
Ever.
materialize that way, and they're playing games with taxpayer dollars. And I don't think if you read the Declaration of Independence it says anything about like funding sports teams, or there's nothing in the Constitution about thou shalt tax Connor and Brittany and all their
You get it
family and
confused with the
friends.
commandment there for a second,
Yeah,
kinda?
well, it's all one and the same. God certainly has never said, pay taxes for the Olympics. And so why is it that we do this? And I don't know, it scratches my head. Maybe it's because it's tradition,
I think
and
that's
it's
what it
just
is, yeah.
yeah.
And especially now, people think like, "Oh, COVID, like, we need to, reunify people," which is also funny to me because a year ago it was, "Don't leave your house," and now it's like, "Well, let's go ahead and have the Olympics. Let's do it."
Although I just saw, well, not just at the time we're recording, they're having another COVID outbreak in Japan, and so now they're saying no audience. So the day that this recording is live, guys, the Olympics is starting. So we're all now going to be able to see like what is actually this going to be like. Will there not be an audience? What will it be like for the athletes to perform in front of like Zoom?
Oh my
Like
goodness.
people watching online. It's just weird, and so much money's been spent, and why? Like I'm with you, Brittany. I'm not really a sports person. I can appreciate athleticism, like people who are really talented, put in the hard work. Like I think that's
Yes.
awesome. And that applies outside of just sports. That's just working hard and really
Being
hard.
determined and committed to something.
Absolutely, absolutely. that could be a musical instrument. It could be academics, underwater basket weaving. I don't know, but like I can appreciate the talent, but I'm not. Why should I pay for underwater basket weaving? If you want to do it, you go pay for it. If you want to do a sport, you go. I don't know. It's weird. So I'm with you. I'm
The
a
moral of the
contrarian.
story here is don't become an underwater basket weaver, I
Yes,
think.
that's what you take away from this episode. We will have succeeded. All right. With that, guys, show notes for today, as Brittany said, the article that she wrote and other resources we will link to at TuttleTwins.com/podcast. Go check that out. As always, share the podcast with friends and family. Really appreciate you guys spreading the word and getting a lot more people to learn about these ideas and little bites and pieces so that we can all appreciate the ideas of freedom and learn more together. Brittany, as always, thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Talk to you next time.
You've been listening to The Way the World Works. Make sure your family is subscribed and check out TuttleTwins.com for more awesome content.